I'm one of many who finds that these animation to live action films mostly just kind of suck. Don't get me wrong, you have the odd film every now and then, like The Jungle Book, that shows some real inspiration. But most of these movies tend to be low cash grabs, with nothing new to add to the story, besides stripping the original films of their gorgeous artwork in favor of live action actors and an endless slog of CGI. It should come as no surprise then that I found one of these films to just be more of the same, while the other, I was shocked to find, was surprisingly okay? I mean, that's better than normal. So take your seat, grab your popcorn bucket, and let's get ready to rumble as I compare these movies to find which had the right ingredients for a successful live action format.
There can be only one.
Fair warning, there will be full spoilers for both the animation and live action versions of these movies. On the surface level, Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon seem to have very little in common. One is a family drama set in Hawaii with a touch of science fiction, while the other would fall under epic fantasy in a completely fictionalized world, with Vikings battling and riding dragons into combat. One was originally classically animated, while the other was CGI. But when you peel back the layers, they have a lot more in common than you might think. Both the original animated movies were brought to screen by the director duo Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois. Both feature a story of a protagonist who takes in a strange, seemingly deadly creature as a pet and forms a bond with it. And both are heavily rooted in our attachment to domestic animals. Underneath the fantastical or science fiction big concept is a much smaller and more relatable family drama. But the approach to bringing these two live action films to life couldn't be more different. For Lilo and Stitch, director Dean Fleischer Camp steps into the director chair. He is mostly known for his cozy but quirky A24 animated movie, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. However, if you're hoping to find that signature irreverent tone here, just kinda put the brake pedal to your expectations. For the How to Train Your Dragon camp, Dean DeBlois returns to direct the same story he brought to screen over a decade ago. He's looking for something simple. He's like this painter trying to recreate an old masterpiece, wishing to transform his classic from the animated form into a replica with just kind of a new shiny coat of paint. How to Train Your Dragon is doing what typically really annoys me with these adaptations. It is in the vein of the other live-action creative vacuums, such as Lion King, The Little Mermaid, or Beauty and the Beast. All three of these movies had this feeling of pointless recreation, a few scenes to pad out the runtime, and a bunch of half-baked visual effects. Yet, as much as I could dog these Disney blockbusters, I find myself comparing How to Train Your Dragon much more to Vince Vaughn's Psycho, a remake of Hitchcock's classic that is a shot-for-shot recreation. Now, you can see clear reverence for the source, but it mostly just makes me wonder, why am I watching this instead of just sitting down for the superior original? And I'd be lying if I didn't say the live-action How to Train Your Dragon elicits a very similar reaction in me, with about 80% of the film being a live-action recreation of exact camera angles and shots translated over from animation. And are we really here just so we can point at the screen and go, yeah, but look how textured those dragons look now? Despite, my personal cynicism in this regard, Dean DeBlois remains dedicated to his original vision. Often for the worse, but just as often with some pretty surprising results. He's only really shifting the story in the smallest, most insignificant ways. Similar to how David Tennant tried to recreate his performance from Broadchurch to Grace Point, the director here, his goal is clearly not reinvention, it's meticulous recreation. And his world at least feels visually coherent. It's never devolving into just broad, unchanneled, computer-generated molasses. Now, it certainly is stuffed to the brim with more CGI than probably even live-action elements, but it feels like it's in service to a at least purposeful vision. It may not look entirely real, but it fits the story they are telling, and doesn't turn into just this barrage of directionless lights and colors that makes you feel like you're having sandpaper run over your eyes. Here's looking at you, Snow White. It's not that. It actually mostly looks pretty good. But do you want to know what will never make you feel as if you're running sandpaper over your eyes? Well, this channel, of course. So be sure to like and subscribe. DeBlois was also smart to bring back Glen Powell's striking score, which may be one of my favorite scores since Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings. Now, I'm no music expert, so all I could do is forward you over to my friend at Film Score and More. He's got this entire series on Powell's music for the film that's absolutely brilliant. Right now, he's going into Powell's subtle if significant changes in the live action version. In many ways, How to Train Your Dragon may be Powell's magnum opus, and he likewise sticks very close to his original sheet music. Yet in one of the most pivotal scenes with the test drive, I was waiting to see if I would get the same chills as I did with the original, and was happy to feel those little, goosebumps and hairs coming up on my arms. It's a scene carried by a masterful score, and also the addition of some very, very good looking flight sequences that look great in live action. But now, let's contrast all of that to Lilo and Stitch, a movie where I'm honestly struggling to say or articulate what the goal really was here. Now, the original creators couldn't even be bothered with this readaptation. Clearly, as DeBlois made a movie in direct competition. And Chris Sanders, his only real role in this new remake is just as the voice of the titular blue alien. Not that that is unwelcome, it's great to hear him back again. So what was it that Fleischer Camp actually brought to the table? Well, first of all, he had to contend with a much smaller budget, as Lilo and Stitch was intended to be a Disney Plus exclusive. I'm guessing whoever decided to send it to theaters got a nice fat raise. You can't be leaving money on the table after all. Yet Fleischer Camp is no stranger to a smaller budget. In fact, he thrives in it. Marcel the Shell began as this self-financed series of shorts before being adapted into a full feature with financing from A24. So a family drama with a fantastical spin should be right up his alley. And the best I can say about this is it does feel more grounded and at least isn't oversaturated with CGI. Perhaps more due to money restraints than, any kind of conscious choice. Nevertheless, this end product really lacks the spark of Marcel the Shell, and Lilo and Stitch ends up feeling like it could have been made by just any hired gun. Where he's really fumbling the ball is with the themes. DeBlois knew his story inside and out, what it was about, and what made people fall in love with it for the first time around. I'm not entirely sure anyone on the 2025 Lilo and Stitch knew what made the 22 version so great. There is a story I heard once, and I can't remember what book I read it from, but it was about legendary screenwriter Paddy Chayefsky, who penned classic screenplays such as Marty and The Network. The story went that when he found the theme of his story, he would write it down and tape it to the front of his typewriter, so that nothing went into the screenplay that contradicted the theme. The screenwriters for Lilo and Stitch probably should have heeded this advice. The thing that makes a conclusion of a story really click is when we feel it could have ended no other way, because the story's very foundation is supported by that strong thematic base. It is the point of the story. It's why it exists. What is the theme to Lilo and Stitch? Well, some movies, it's hard to say, written in subtext over the runtime. Movies directed towards children, they're rarely that subtle. Here, they state it loud and clear.
Ohana means family. Family means nobody
gets left behind.
Okay, it's probably the most famous quote from the entire movie. Yes, Lilo and Stitch, it's about a little girl accidentally adopting an alien as a dog. But what the story really is about is the struggle of two orphan sisters trying to keep their small broken family together. This is enforced in the original by having Stitch and Lilo reflect each other's development. Lilo is not a bad kid, but she gets into fights, runs off, gets her sister fired from her job that supports them both, and she often kicks, screams, and yells. She's an untamed force, too young to understand how doing all this makes life for her sister hard and miserable. Stitch, likewise, is an alien of chaos and mischief, who daydreams of destroying cities or just ripping apart whatever piece of furniture happens to be closest to him. They are kindred spirits. They're not irredeemable, as Lilo's educators and peers like to try and paint her.
Maybe we should call your sister.
No, I'll be good. You're crazy.
Or as deadly threats like the Galactic Empire tries to paint Stitch. Stitch's entire switch comes with the story of the ugly duckling. It's a story he heartbreakingly relates to such an extent that he tries to recreate a scene to find a family.
lost.
It's kind of just through Stitch's misbehavior and, effect on their life that Lilo sees the damage of her own mischief and creates a more productive relationship with her sister and community. The whole thing is revolving around the simple concept of a bad dog becoming a good dog. The real danger of the story is not that Stitch will destroy a city or aliens invade or other trite, overblown stakes. The danger is that they will fail to change, and because of that, Lilo will be taken away from her sister, and Stitch will be carried off back into space and locked away. The whole thing is about keeping family together. Knowing all this, why? Why would you strip all this out of the movie? I do not understand it. First off, the ugly duckling story, it's completely cut. So you lack that really good pivotal moment and switch for Stitch. But more damningly, the movie ends with Nani, the sister, willingly giving up Lilo to the foster care system so she can pursue her own dream of going to college. It really is enough to make me want to bash my head through a wall. I'm not saying that adding the struggle of Nani trying to decide to abandon Lilo is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, this is shortly after their parents' death, and her doubt that she is the right person to raise her, it's not a bad thing. That could be a really good, interesting addition. It adds new texture. But a smart screenwriter would have looked back at that theme taped to a sticky note on their computer, and they would have promptly deleted this entire ending. Because had they had that theme written there, they would have seen it in bold. Ohana means family. It does not mean shirking your responsibilities and relationships to chase your own dreams. And just for comparison, this is how Nani reacts to Lilo being taken away from her in the original.
Please, don't do this.
No! You're not taking her! You don't know what you're doing! She needs me!
Here, she bums Lilo off on her sorta boyfriend's mother, and then uses a portal gun to just, I guess, visit her every now and then.
Well, that's all right then.
This is the film wanting to have its cake and eat it too. It's one of the more tone-deaf moments I've seen for a film's conclusion. To make matters worse, Nani's told the Ohana quote by the CPS agent who's trying to take her sister away, who then tells her another quote that means something like, "You should never leave yourself behind." As a result, the film is at war with itself thematically. Usually this wouldn't be a bad thing, it would be a good thing, and could have added conflict as Nani would fight her selfish impulses to do the right thing and put family before self, thus fulfilling the commitment to the end message of the movie. Instead, what we see is her wants prevail over the needs of thematic symmetry. This is completely opposite to How to Train Your Dragon's approach. The original also had a not-so-subtle theme of expectation, particularly from a parental figure. Hiccup struggles to live up to the legend of his father, who hopes and expects that Hiccup will one day become this warrior like him and become chief of their island. Hiccup is never fully able to live up to these high expectations because he is not his father. This is a story that's not about him bettering himself really like Lilo and Stitch had to, but rather embracing that which he's already good at. He is finding and embracing his independent self, and by doing so, finally winning his father's approval, not through brawn, but smarts, and choosing to seek understanding and peace. He does this all by befriending a dragon and learning to fly the skies. All of this in its entirety stays intact. Better than that, actually. This is one of the few areas where the live-action film acts to strengthen the theme of the original. It's not really doing this through major screenplay changes, but rather through subtleties in performance, notably from Gerard Butler and Mason Thames. Most scenes that were added were between these two or additional material shot for Gerard Butler. Now, a cynic here would say they only did this because Butler is their biggest star in the movie and they wanted to give him more screen time. And yeah, that probably did play into it. But Butler's additional scenes are all about expanding on his dynamic and expectations for his son. It is strengthening the core foundations of the movie, not chipping away at them. And that's not to say you can't dramatically break from the original version. In fact, in many ways, I'd almost prefer that because then it would be something different and have a reason to exist. And on paper, I would say that Lilo and Stitch actually has far more potential than How to Train Your Dragon for taking old story beats but spinning them in a fresh way. As I said before, there's nothing wrong with making additional conflict for Nani. She easily has potential for being a more active character. But let's play a what-if scenario here. What if the live-action version had decided to shift focus to her instead, make her the primary protagonist? What if it became the story of Lilo and Stitch from Nani's perspective? Such perspective shifts can be a goldmine for interesting retellings, as shown by both the stage play and the cinematic Wicked. You could have focused in here instead on the story of an 18-year-old girl who has motherhood thrust upon her, dealing with her unruly younger sister, and fighting to keep what's left of her broken family together. This has the makings of a strong retelling, while keeping the core of her bonding with her sister through the very normal act of adopting a dog. Well, alien, but you get what I mean. Here you could mine something rich, new, and fresh, something familiar, but taken at a new angle. Hell, you could even retitle it to Nani and Stitch if you really wanted to. And although the film, it is expanding on a lot of these things, somewhat, it's clunky because the screenwriters did not have their eyes on the basics of good storytelling. Instead, they got lost chasing the modern notion of self-actualization being a virtue. That's not to say it's not, but the problem here is that is not the story of Lilo and Stitch. That's the story of How to Train Your Dragon.
You get your own movie.
The disconnect here between the themes and this ending, it really just doesn't gel in any way, and it sours me on the entire experience, as it seems to be promoting, self-gratification and living your best life over your responsibilities. And I'm not entirely certain I think that's a great message. On the other hand, Hiccup didn't shirk his responsibilities in his discovery of individuality over conformity. Self-acceptance, instead, was a road to finding a better way to serve his responsibilities, and he ended a generational-long conflict by doing so. It still even involved some additional sacrifices of its own. Make no mistake, How to Train Your Dragon is a creative vacuum, like a lot of these live-action remakes. It has nothing to add or say to the story that was already brilliantly told in animated form. But what it does have over Lilo and Stitch is a basic understanding of what makes a story satisfying. Contrary to some belief, a good ending is not something shocking that defies our expectation. It's also not necessarily an ending that makes us feel good or feel bad. A good ending is one that serves the through line of the screenplay and reinforces those themes over and over again, with the actions of the character constantly reinforcing them, and then the ending driving it home. If you are wondering why How to Train Your Dragon comes off as the more competent movie, it is not because it's doing anything revolutionary. It falls into nearly every pratfall of the Disney live-action remake. The reason it succeeds is because DeBlois understood his own story. He understood what made it click and what made people come back to it again. A good story can be performed by many artists and actors and remain strong for centuries if the foundations are right. They can even survive bold retellings and complete redesign. How to Train Your Dragon understood the core themes of the original. Lilo and Stitch? It simply didn't. I've always said that most of these live-action remakes are just the same movie, but done worse. How to Train Your Dragon, I guess, is more of a lateral movement. It's the same movie, but the same. It adds nothing, but those looking for just a purified translation from one medium to another, they're likely going to get to experience a story strong enough to survive a second retelling. Lilo and Stitch takes more narrative chances, but changes all the wrong things. So while How to Train Your Dragon can feel pointless, it at least doesn't feel regressive. It won by playing it safe. That may be a Pyrrhic victory, but it's at least an improvement on most of these live-action attempts. So I guess I'll take it. Also, just as a side note, that killer score alone may be worth the price of admission just on its own. I've still got those tunes stuck in my head, okay? I can't get them out. And that's all I've got to say on these two movies. If you like this video, subscribe for more historical film flashbacks and modern movie analysis. Keep those reels turning.